let's secure an agreement that builds in ambition.
The window of opportunity to act is closing very fast.
2021 is shaping up as the year when climate change returned to the global agenda.
We need to keep the Earth's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. America has a key role to play in hitting that mark.
There has clearly been a change of narrative, a sense of urgency has crept into that discussion.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. And thank you very much for making the journey to meet with us.
The US state of Alaska recently hosted a group of Chinese officials
We do not seek conflict, but we welcome stiff competition
for a summit that helped Beijing and Washington find some common ground on climate policy.
What we now have is an opportunity for the international community to get together and manage this enormous problem. And I think that the President of the United States, Biden, now understands this. His appointment of John Kerry to lead the climate negotiations on behalf of the United States was a tremendously good sign.
This next one, restoring trust in government through science and integrity and evidence-based policymaking.
Seeking to reset American leadership on climate change at home and abroad, Joe Biden announced in January that the US would rejoin the 2015 Paris Agreement.
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. I thank you all for your time.
Sir, what's happening? Now Biden is in office, I think there's a question in the international community about the seriousness of the United States and whether or not we are actually going to be able to live up to our commitments.
US media is reporting that his government will pledge to cut US greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030, nearly doubling the nation's previous commitment. Joe Biden says he'll put climate at the centre of US foreign policy and national security decision-making. President Biden also wants US electricity to be carbon neutral no later than 2035 and plans to put an end to international financing of fossil fuel-based energy.
This is the first time that the United States has been talking up a leadership position on switching away from the fossil fuel programs of the past.
Biden's multi-trillion-dollar economic package will boost investment in clean energy, the kind of green economic revolution long pursued by US states like California, even in the Trump years.
What California has shown is that you need a comprehensive approach to dealing with the climate crisis. Carbon pricing, subsidizing renewable energy, and increasing energy efficiency. And I think that's actually provided a model that the Biden administration is now using at the national level.
With an economy more than twice the size of Australia's, California has long been a first mover on progressive climate policies.
California has had a zero-emission vehicle policy since the 1990s.
Please wait for confirmation.
State Energy Commissioner Patty Monahan says California, home to Elon Musk's Tesla, is accelerating investments in electric vehicles at an unprecedented scale.
Transportation emissions are half of all of our global warming pollution, and in the long run, the only solution is to zero out that pollution. And to do it, we need to have this ubiquitous refueling infrastructure.
China now accounts for about 30% of global CO2 emissions. That's about twice as much as the US, the second largest emitter.
China surprised the world last year, announcing its emissions would peak before 2030, before China goes carbon neutral by 2060. China's emissions trading system will begin operating in June, and the nation will either need to slash production or use renewable energy to produce cement, industrial chemicals and steel, shaking up an industry that Australia depends on.
If I was to put my money on a country making its net zero target in the requisite time, I wouldn't bet against China meeting that target.
It's difficult to imagine the United States winning the long-term strategic competition with China if we cannot lead the renewable energy revolution. Right now, we're falling behind. If we don't catch up, America will miss the chance to shape the world's climate future in a way that reflects our interests and values.
Under the Paris Agreement, countries agreed to limit the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees. In the US, emissions have begun to trend down, as have emissions from the European Union. In China, where more than half of the country's total energy consumption is powered by coal, emissions have increased dramatically.
China added 30 gigawatts of coal last year. That's about 15 very large coal-fired power stations. We need to help our customer countries, whether it's Japan or Korea or in Southeast Asia or China, to bring down their emissions by using technologies that allow them to strengthen their economy.
The question for Australia is, will you now please join in with the rest of the world to manage this enormous problem? Australia's recent history has, frankly, been very poor on this issue.
What new emissions targets will the Australian government be taking to the Biden Leaders Summit this week?
Well, look, Andy, we constantly update our projections on our outcomes versus our targets. 2030, of course, is the target now. Those targets are a floor on our ambitions, not a cap. We'll meet and beat them.
It's a great privilege to be here with all of you tonight. Angus Taylor's here tonight, and I want to commend Angus for the great job he's been doing on energy and emissions reduction. We're not going to achieve net zero in the cafes, dinner parties and wine bars of our inner cities.
The government hasn't locked in a net zero by 2050 target. The government hasn't revisited its short-term target and looked at how it can increase its emission reductions by 2030. The government has just followed the same old path, announcing money for technologies that include support for the fossil fuel industry.
We take our emissions reduction targets very seriously.
Our diplomats will challenge the practices of countries whose action or inaction is setting the world back. When countries continue to rely on coal for a significant amount of their energy, or invest in new coal factories, or allow for massive deforestation, they will hear from the United States.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Is the US making this somewhat veiled threat about calling countries concerning to you?
The US and Australia and other countries around the world all want to see emissions coming down. This is not about declaring war on industries. Our outcomes are strong. They're better than comparable countries, including the United States. People make a lot of promises. The difference with Australia is we deliver.
Do you doubt the US commitment?
We always have. No, I'm just saying that we always deliver. I'm talking about Australia's performance. We're 19% down as of this year. Better than Japan, better than Korea, better than New Zealand, better than Canada. Our performance has been strong.
We had a very significant emission reduction period from about 2007 to 2013 as a result of land clearing legislation and the price on carbon introduced by the previous government. Since then, we've had a very slight reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and in fact, in terms of fossil fuel emissions, we've actually kept on going up until we hit COVID.
The criticism being made of your government is that it lacks leadership and commitment over climate change goals. How do you respond to those critics?
We have the commitment and we're delivering. What matters at the end of the day is outcomes. What matters at the end of the day is delivery, and we are delivering. We'll continue to deliver. Our goals are strong. We do want to get to net zero. We do want to get there as quickly as possible.
What we have in terms of a target is not consistent with that Paris Agreement goal that we have. And one of those elements is how much emissions we should be reducing to stay aligned with the Paris Agreement goals of 1.5 degrees if possible, or 2 degrees, well below 2 degrees. And that really does mean we need to have something like emission reductions of 40 to 45% by 2030.
There is a sense that the government will have to move and renew the emissions targets sometime this year. Are you ruling that out before Glasgow, or ruling that out before the next election?
Well, I've always said, and I said it a moment ago, that we always update our emissions projections year on year. Well, Australia provides one of the most transparent carbon accounting and projection regimes in the world. Each year we update those projections. We'll do that this year as we have in the past. They have improved every year since we've been in government. I'm confident that will continue.
The Prime Minister has hinted recently about committing to a mid-century net zero target. What's to lose if the government could just make that announcement? Why can't you just make that announcement? Everybody else is.
Well, our goal is to get to net zero. That's part of the Paris Agreement. We want to do it as soon as possible, preferably before 2050. We've been unambiguous about that. The real challenge for the world on this is how to do it. Every year since we've been doing this, since we came into government, we've improved our position versus both our 2020 and 2030 targets. That will continue to be the case.
The US has announced it will cut their emissions by 50% by 2030, requiring us to double our targets to keep pace, according to the Australia Institute. So if you're the Minister for Emissions Reductions, why aren't you doing the same?
Well, we'll continue to improve our position year on year, as we always have, Andy. And the thing about Australia is we've always delivered. It's outcomes that matter here.
The COP26 climate conference in Glasgow later this year will be D-Day for nations to find a path to keep global temperatures below dangerous levels.
That's really going to set the stage for everyone else, and it's going to be the commitments on the part of the world's two largest historical emitters of carbon now, the United States and China. It's going to be their commitments that are going to force other intransigent actors, other petrostates, to come to the table with meaningful commitments themselves. And I think Australia is foremost among them.
We'll be releasing our long-term strategy ahead of COP26 later this year. It's crucial we continue to stay focused. It's crucial that we continue to maintain our resolve and in ways that don't tell consumers what kind of vehicles they've got to drive or houses they've got to live in. It's got to respect Australians' roles in businesses and households, but at the same time deploy those technologies in ways that strengthen our economy and bring down emissions at the same time.
We really need to ratchet up those commitments that start to align us with the goal of limiting warming below truly dangerous levels.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.